Hi, dear listeners, and welcome back to Blush and Bloom, the podcast where we talk about women's health, self care, and everything in between. I'm your host, Gigi, founder of Asele, your space for cycle aware and preventive care. I'm really glad you're here with me on this journey to unpack women's health and highlight the incredible things being built in this space. So let's get into today's episode. All right. Hi, Dr. Oshin. It's a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. So, for those who are meeting you for the first time, how do you introduce yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, for sure. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I would like to introduce myself by starting with my name. It's actually a Japanese name, but I'm from India. And I did my medical degree in India, which was the beginning of my career. And now I'm working as a clinician-scientist with an MBA degree as well. I'm quite passionate about patient-centric technologies. And that's basically what I love to work on, whether that's in my full-time role or whether it's in my mentorship or whether it's in my startup consulting. So I just love to work with patient-centric technologies. That's my passion. I love to mentor students. And yeah, that's how I would say that it covers most of my present passions.
All right, that's really awesome. And your experience so far, you're a clinician, you're a scientist, and now you're an innovation manager. How do these identities connect in your work so far?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, maybe I should start with maybe going chronologically backwards. I currently work as an innovation manager at this company called ZEISS. It's a technology company, and I have the role of basically evaluating deep tech and seeing how we can have a commercial product which would be quite cutting edge, which would disrupt the market, sometimes even disrupt our own products. So that's what I'm trying to do, working on Horizon 3 technologies. And I think that this role really captures what I have learned throughout my education and in my career. So I started as a medical doctor, then I transitioned to research, did my clinical postdoc, and then I did an MBA just to understand how business works. And now in my role, I'm working as an innovation manager, but between my MBA and now, I was working as a venture manager actually for an accelerator program. It was a mentorship slash accelerator program. And even that was more about deep tech. So I think that now in my role, I'm able to really combine this competency of understanding how clinical research or other kind of deep tech can fit into and impact the clinical workflow. Because I think there's a big gap in that. And I think it's important to remember that anything that's not commercially viable is not going to be successful. So even when I'm evaluating these science based facts, I have to keep in mind the commercial side. So that's how I would summarize what I'm doing right now.
All right, awesome. So you're a doctor. How did you find yourself in health innovation? Like, what drew you to decide that you want to step away from the clinic and do this sort of work instead, which is actually very, very incredible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was a little bit of serendipity, honestly. I wouldn't say that this was something that I had planned from day one. After I finished my medical degree, because during my medical degree, I was also doing a little bit of research. I was visiting Europe for conferences, presenting my research. So that's where I got exposure to the field of health innovation, which I hadn't gotten before. And then I decided to come to Germany to actually pursue a clinical postdoc where I gave myself time to choose. So I told myself that I'm going to do this clinical postdoc, which is basically going to be in a hospital while working with patients as well. So this will give me time to understand where my passion truly lies. So do I want to work with our partners who are really giving us the technology that we have to research? Or do I want to work more with the patients one on one? And during that time, I realized that really by being on the partner side, that is on the technology innovation side, you can make such a huge impact. And there is a gap in the translation between the needs of patients, what doctors want, what the healthcare system wants, and what technologies are actually being developed. So I decided that, okay, maybe that's what I should do because that's something that I'm passionate about. And I've never looked back. So I'm quite happy that I got into health innovation.
That's so cool. I don't have the right adjective right now. That's very interesting. So you mentor it's okay, this is going to be like a two-part question. So you mentor medical students who want to help patients in unorthodox ways. By unorthodox, what does that mean in this context?
Yeah, I mean exactly something like what I'm doing. So when you think about medical tech or working in healthcare innovation, you don't really think directly about patient impact. So you're not thinking that, oh, I'm still helping patients out. So I wanted to bring some medical students out of that mindset and really not differentiate their career between either working full time in a hospital or having to join a pharma company or having to join a corporate role full time. I want to be able to choose for themselves. Sometimes even doing both parallelly is possible. It's really up to them. So I want to mentor them through this process of understanding the different ways in which you can actually help patients, which is not just one on one by working in a clinic full time. You can also join a health innovation company full time, or you can consult startups that are developing digital health technologies for patients. You can consult a pharma company, you can be a KOL. Like there are literally so many options. So I usually mentor them about these things so that they can make the decision in an informed way.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. And the second part of the question is, why is this important to you? But I think you already answered it in a way. We could move on to another question because you already talked about the why. Okay. So from your perspective, what are the biggest innovation gaps in women's health right now?
I think recently made a post about this as well on my LinkedIn, where I was talking about how much of a gap exists between even the basic research that's been done in women's health and the clinical perception towards women. I think that innovation is not just from the side of technology, but it's also on the side of processes in systems. And I think that's where currently the biggest gap lies, because I think we have tried to overcompensate by going directly into the technology innovation side. But at the same time, we shouldn't forget that till we don't collect the data on what are the actual unmet needs for female patients, we will not be able to address them. So I think clinical trials, which can include more and more female participants, and really developing systems that can help women better, diagnostics that can identify that, okay, for a female patient, what are the special considerations that need to be made in the identification of this disease, things like that. So I'm sure that machine learning would play a huge role in this. But even from the point of diagnostics and in clinical research, I think there's a huge gap in women's health.
Okay. I think just if I understood you correctly, I think your response also is similar to somebody else I had on the podcast where she was like, yes, we are doing this research and doing all this stuff, but the adoption and actually involving the women in the research is low. And then we have another part of the problem where it's like, okay, you have this new tool, but then the doctors or healthcare practitioners aren't willing to adopt this new tool. Like, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think that is very close to what I was also saying. So I'm happy that this was validated by someone else as well. But I think that systemically, there is a huge problem in women's health research. I mean, recently there was a ban on certain research topics in the US. The US has historically been the biggest funding body for most clinical research. So it is really quite scary that things like women, gender diversity, female health, all of these topics are basically banned from any federal funding, which is, I think,
That doesn't even make any sense.
exactly. It doesn't make sense. It's preposterous. And it's just so bizarre that we are basically going backwards when it comes to clinical research. So I feel like the clinical researchers themselves need to step up and stop waiting for government mandates or a mandate from some institute to actually do some research or to include certain participants from certain groups and really do it themselves. So I think that's what really needs to be done, to take ownership.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on that, because when you said it, I was confused. And then I remember, I saw a post about that on LinkedIn and I didn't quite understand the ramifications of it. That is crazy. So let me ask you another question, because that left me a bit, I'm uncomfortable. So you've worked on strategies for gynecology and AI diagnostics. What excites you the most about AI's potential, and where do you think we should be cautious about using it?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think firstly, I'll actually go with the cautious part first, because I think that goes into the advantages as well. I think we, especially clinical researchers, don't entirely understand AI. And I think that's one of the biggest cautions, because something that you don't understand, it's very easy to overestimate or underestimate it. So
Yeah.
when you're overestimating it, you will end up making certain decisions based on the AI that are probably not completely based in fact. And AI also brings with it a lot of bias, right? So this is entirely related to the previous thing that I was saying, the perception of clinical doctors and clinical research in the field of women's health. So if this data doesn't exist, then what will the AI really go on? So there's nothing for the AI to build its data up upon. That's, I think, one of the biggest problems and the bias that comes with it. And I think that on the flip side of this, I think a lot of clinical people really underestimate AI. I think there are a lot of solutions out there that are focusing on workflow solutions for hospitals and scribes and AI scribes that can help improve the working time of doctors. And I'm not saying that's bad, I think that's great, but I don't think that exploits the full potential of AI in medicine. I mean, a really big example of this is when a few years ago, AI had basically discovered this completely new protein, which was not clear to the whole pharma industry and the biotech industry for years. And then AI identified that. But now we are, I think, underestimating how much we can use AI. And I think that's kind of the disadvantage. And I would really, really love to see more machine learning and deep learning models dedicated to clinical diagnostics and treatment planning. I think those are the two areas where I really see it. And I want to see this trend of AI being used in the most prosperous areas reduce a little bit, because I think one of the biggest advantages of AI is that it can make things accessible, which was not accessible before. I mean, people can now code things with ChatGPT, which was not possible. So why not use that to make health more accessible? Like, what's the point of using it in the best hospitals where doctors and clinicians are actually completely equipped to make those decisions, rather than in the less fortunate areas where they actually need these resources? So use AI there, So I think I really see a huge potential for AI.
I really wonder how that implementation will look like for low resource areas, because I mean, like, for example, in Nigeria, we are seeing people trying to use AI, especially for, I think, like, one of the basic ways so far is for language, like being able to translate multiple medical texts into more languages and being able for people to be able to converse. But then we also have to consider that there are people within areas who don't even have access to a smartphone or have electricity to charge said smartphone. Like, how can they access something like this? So we'll see how it evolves over time, if it will actually include people who need this access, or it will just continue to scale upward for only a certain group of people. So we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I would really like to follow up on that, because I think that what you just mentioned, right? Like, people don't have access to basic electricity. So how can we expect them to benefit from AI? I think for that, it's really important to remember that if you don't have basic electricity, what that also means is that the devices that are used for diagnostics might not be able to work in the main centers where they are supposed to be working. So, what can you do? You can actually use a device that uses much lesser power to take the symptoms of patients and be able to predict the diagnosis. So these are kind of the things where AI could be really useful. And I think that translation is, of course, super helpful in medicine, but I don't think it's a medical AI use case. I know people love to say that, but I don't actually think that creating a scribe or creating a translator for medical needs is medical AI at all, because it needs to be helping in the clinical workflow somehow, whether it's from a diagnostic perspective or from a treatment perspective. So, yeah, I think we could do so much more.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective on that. That also gave me a lot of things to think about. Okay. So, and I think I could also explore more about how other founders in Africa in general are building out AI models and seeing what they're doing, because it's very interesting to see how people are able to match, try to adjust things to fit a certain context, because that problem exists there. Okay. So you often speak about bringing health tech to the masses. You already talked about this a little bit, but are there any other ways that this could look like in practice?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I spoke about using AI to make health accessible. So, of course, that's one of the aspects of that. But I think making health tech more accessible and more affordable is one of the biggest needs that we have right now. Because I think for the longest time, yes, we have dealt with a lot of technological innovation. I mean, I work in Germany, so I'm surrounded by all this great technology. But I think that many of these solutions are often over engineered, and they are often in this premium bracket where it's not really accessible and translatable to a market that can't really afford it, or something that has a much higher population where things cannot really take that much time. So I think making things faster, making things more non invasive, and making things more affordable. I think these are the things that need to be focused on when it comes to health tech, because it's not just about having a diagnostic tool for diagnosing endometriosis on MRI, which is really such a great unmet need right now. But it's also about screening, using technology and health tech for screening public populations. I feel like that's quite important. And that also ties into women's health, actually, because there are so many big populations where women don't have access to the most basic health education, to diagnostics, to screening, let alone treatment. I mean, if you actually don't even know what you're supposed to look for and you don't get checked for that, then how are you supposed to seek treatment, even if you had the money to seek it? Because there are so many examples in India, for example, where you have small towns where you actually have wealthy people. So it's not like they are poor, but it's just that they don't have the health education because it has never reached them. Because people have always been focusing on tier one cities, which are the bigger cities with more wealth. And because they are not educated, they don't even have a chance to access the diagnostics and treatment that could have saved their life. And I think that's what I mean when I say that we need to make health tech come to the masses.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That makes a whole lot of sense, and I think that would be actually really, really cool to have. And I like that you shared this example, because it also sheds light on why I'm building what I'm building as well. Because yeah, I agree that you can't prevent something from happening if you don't even know what you're even looking out for. Like, I love that these days we have social media that's helpful along with this sort of education, where you can scroll on Instagram and then you see a random short about the girl who is showing you how to check your breast for lumps and stuff. You can scroll again, you're seeing somebody talking about like symptoms of endometriosis that usually for the longest time people thought that period cramps were like normal. So I really love that social media is also playing a role here in making this kind of education accessible. And we have other platforms also promoting this stuff, because it's like you can prevent something if you don't even know that that's even a symptom of anything or what you're supposed to be looking out for in the first place.
Exactly.
Okay. So another question I have for you is there a misconception about medical AI that you'd like to challenge?
I think I addressed this a little bit when I was talking about the advantages and disadvantages of AI. I think I ended up addressing that. But I can just reiterate that I think a huge misconception about medical AI is that a scribe to do some kind of documentation is medical AI. I do not count it as medical AI. These are just process improvers which have their own place. They improve the workflow, sure, but are they really having any sort of patient impact directly? Yes, indirectly, you are saving time, you are able to see more patients, maybe, but is our goal really to see more patients? Because that seems to be something that is again feeding into the capitalism that has sort of bled into healthcare already, that you need to see more patients so that you can make more money, you know? But that's not really the point of medical AI. It's really about making everyone's life better, be it the patients or the doctors, and doing things that are not really humanly possible, whether it's about the speed of diagnostics, which AI is really good at, whether it's the ability to see certain biomarkers that are not really visible to the human eye, or being able to detect certain patterns that are not really possible for us to detect without putting in a lot more resources. So I think we should be using medical AI for all that. And I think it's a complete misconception that having a scribe or a translator counts as medical AI. I wouldn't count that.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. I also wanted to get your thoughts on personalized medicine, or maybe personalized AI for medical personalization, something like that. Like, is it actually, because I've been seeing it a lot, and I also subscribe to the idea a little bit because my platform is trying to like support women who are trying to like cycle sync. So it's supposed to like learn what your patterns are and then adjust accordingly. So I wanted to get your thoughts on personalized medicine. Like, is this something that's actually doable, or it's a buzzword that people keep throwing around? Like, because it's not easy to gather all this data, and people aren't even gathering the data as much in the first place. But is it actually possible to like gather all this data and then be able to create some kind of personalized, I don't know what, like treatment plan or something? Like, is this actually something that's doable, or it's just
Yeah. No, definitely. That's a good question, because I think I have heard about precision and
yeah.
personalized medicine even before I was in medical school, which is a long, long time ago. And I think, firstly, I would like to make that distinction. Precision medicine is about studying the whole population, getting data, and really making things as precise as possible when it comes to either getting a diagnosis or recommending a treatment based on a certain diagnosis, because now you have way more data and you can give a more precise treatment plan or something. With personalized medicine, it is at an individual level. So you are creating this, of course, collection of data, but then you're also linking in a lot of personal aspects of the patient. And I don't think it's a buzzword. I don't think it's a fad. I don't think it's one of those things that's going to disappear. I think that's really the next step when it comes to medical care. Uh, People are pretty sick of being treated as a statistic, you know, being treated as, okay, if the population needs this, then you need this. I feel like that's not really the way to go when it comes to medicine. And I think that personalized medicine is going exactly in the right direction. But I would say that a lot of people are doing precision medicine and calling it personalized medicine, which is a bit unfortunate because it completely misses the point of personalized medicine. Because if we don't know what individual factors would really be influencing someone's treatment recommendation, then we can't really make that recommendation. So I think anyone who is getting into a field of personalized medicine, whether that's chronic disease, whether that's something like female health, where you're working on the menstrual cycle, whether that's, I don't know, tracking your own health just in general without any sort of disease, just for preventative purposes. I think anyone who is getting into these fields should be very purpose driven, in the sense that they should be knowing what is it that the individual will contribute to the treatment recommendation. So how can you make it more personalized and not just put the sticker of personalized onto actually a precision medicine solution? So I think that's the only thing that I would caution people about who are getting into personalized medicine, because be it investors, be it doctors, everyone can see through these kinds of solutions. Patients can sometimes get misguided by it because they see this fancy word and they go like, oh wow, this is going to be for me and I am special. I'm not just a statistic, but they are not adopted very well. Because I think patients also after one point realize that like my colleague who is a different age than me, who is a different ethnicity than me, who has a different reproductive background than me, whatever it may be, is getting the same recommendations. So how is this personalized? So I think that we should really take care of that so that patients don't lose faith in the field.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on that. So, how do you think industry players like corporates and startups can work together to close the gaps that exist in health or women's health, maybe specifically?
Yeah, maybe I can talk about women's health because I think health is too broad, but I think it sort of applies to all kinds of fields in health. I think startups and industry players have their own advantages and they should not try to copy one another. So that is the first thing, that an industry player obviously has the advantage that they can throw a lot more capital at a problem. They can work much longer with a problem, make things better and step by step and really iterate on the solution because they have the capacity and the privilege to do that. Um, Whereas startups are much more lean, right? So they have to work on solutions much faster. I mean, I have worked with both kinds of companies. I have consulted startups, managed these startups in my previous role. And currently, as a part of a larger company, I also see like a very startup oriented mindset in some of the parts of the industry player as well. So I think that that's also something that's quite important, that when an industry player is working with a startup, while the whole industry player doesn't need to sort of copy the idea and the style of a startup, they need to have their own divisions that are much more autonomous, that are much more flexible and able to work in a lean way so that they can speak the same language as the startup and really work closely together. And I think in such cases, really magic happens. I mean, we have worked with so many startups in the past, be it in optics or in health, and all of them have been such fruitful collaborations. And in the end, it's actually the patient that benefits because the startup that has developed a technology quite fast now needs the support of this industry player to basically either bring it to market, to reach certain customers that it wouldn't have reached before. So it can actually benefit more patients that way. And it can also make the solution a bit more elegant in a way. So I think this way, industry and startups can really work together in women's health as well to bring solutions into the market. And in the middle, there's this startup like component of the industry player, which is responsible for translating the startup into the industry and the industry to the startup, which is sort of also what my role is. That's where I stand in this industry startup collaboration.
That's so cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so we are headed towards the end of the podcast now. So, is there something that's happening within the women's health space that you are so excited about?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to put it because I'm not excited about why it's happening, but I'm excited that it's happening. Recently, I mean, when I say recently in medicine, it means like the last 10 years, there has been an uptrend in infertility in women. So it's not just infertility in general, meaning the trend of infertility is actually rising in the whole population, but it's also the diagnosis of infertility that's rising up. And so far, most of the cases, frustratingly, have always been idiopathic. So people really can't identify the cause of the infertility in women. Whereas in men, it's actually quite straightforward. So either you have sperm motility or you have sperm count or something, and then you can actually really classify that this is the reason for the infertility. Whereas in women, it's a much more less understood system or a much more complicated system. And that's why doctors often go like, "Oh, this is like unknown reasons." And I can just imagine how frustrating that must be for any woman who is trying to conceive, to hear that, that I am not able to have a child. They have checked me structurally, they have checked my hormones, and they are telling me that it's unknown, but I just can't have a child for some reason. And I think that is so frustrating. It infuriates me that it's something that's such a big part of life. I mean, reproduction is what keeps the world going. And yet there's such little understanding around that. And I think that is what excites me as well now, because there's a lot of research going into women's health and infertility. And there are a lot more solutions that are also helping women deal with the infertility. And using the cycle tracking, etc., you can actually really work around your own hormones when it comes to infertility. So I think the field of infertility is one of those which will really grow in the coming years. And I really hope it does. I mean, I'm hoping that the numbers for infertility actually go down, hopefully, that the chemicals and the lifestyle changes that are causing them somehow improve. But I hope that the research continues and the solutions that are in the industry also increase.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on that. I didn't know, but thank you for sharing that. Okay, so final three-ish questions. If you could leave one message for a woman who's listening to this podcast, what would that be?
I don't like to preach, but I would say knowledge is power. I would leave that message to any woman who's listening to this podcast. I think throughout the podcast, we've discussed so much around the diagnostics and the treatment of women's health issues. I think that every woman, whether she is in the medical industry or in any other industry, needs to have the knowledge to be able to make certain decisions for herself. And we don't always need to rely on certain videos on Instagram or TikTok. Right now, there are resources out there that are really helping with this kind of knowledge. And I really hope that women use these resources to empower themselves when it comes to making these decisions and really choosing the right provider or choosing the right kind of diagnostic method or treatment, and really questioning your physician. I mean, don't be afraid to question your clinician when they are suspecting something, and when they tell you that, oh, you've gained weight, you have cramps, and you have some kind of hormonal irregularity, or you just need to lose weight and you need to stress less. I think that that's something that every woman has heard in her life. And that's when you need to question them and say, no, I don't think so. I think you need to do more diagnostic tests. I don't think that I'm satisfied with this answer. And I really hope that every woman hopefully does that and feels like they are empowered to take care of themselves.
Yep, this is a topic that has come up in the podcast a couple of times. I've also asked it, like, how women can advocate for themselves better, and usually the responses are along the lines of presenting the data, educating yourself, and being able to stand firmly and get the answers that you want. And if they're not giving you if they're not willing to budge, you go to another place. Yeah, I think this is I'm happy that there are so many people who are speaking out about women's health and femtech and all this, and women's health innovation, and working in spaces like you as well. So I'm really excited about what the future has for women. Okay, so second penultimate question, if that's the right use of penultimate. What would you tell 15-year-old you?
That's a deep question. What would I tell 15-year-old me? What was I doing at 15? Yeah, I think I was really confused, I would say. I think that I was scared because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I mean, till I was 17, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to go into engineering or being a doctor, um, because I was always curious about science. That's always been a part of me because of my upbringing as well. But I wasn't sure where to pursue it. And I think that I was just so terrified that I'm going to make the wrong decision, or I don't know where I'll end up, and this decision is going to affect me for the rest of my life. I would like to tell the 15-year-old me that she needs to take a chill pill and not think so much about what the future holds. Life has a way of just having you on the right path as long as you figure your ikigai out, as long as you know what your purpose is. That's what you should be focusing on rather than thinking what degree to pursue. Just keep saying yes to opportunities, because I think that is what has helped me the most in life. And I'll continue to say yes to opportunities. So I would have just told her that as well.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And the final question is for people who want to learn more about you and your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, on LinkedIn, there you found me. So
Yep.
I'm glad that we connected there. And in the future, I'll also have a personal website, because sometimes it's hard to navigate my passions and my knowledge base on LinkedIn. So I'll definitely do that. So stay tuned, I guess.
Awesome. Looking forward to seeing it. And thank you so much, Dr. Oshin. It's been incredible learning from you and your experiences and everything, especially I think my favorite part was learning about how AI can be adopted better and better utilized. So thank you so much for sharing your perspectives with me and the listeners on the podcast.
Thank you very much. I think this was a great discussion, and I hope that people find it interesting as well and take something away from it. Thank you for inviting me.
Hi again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Blush and Bloom. I'm so glad you joined me for this conversation. If you found it helpful, please share this episode with a friend or someone who might need it. Let's keep talking about women's health and working towards better outcomes for all of us. You can find more episodes and resources at www.asele.tech and check out our app at www.asele.health. And you can follow us for more updates on Instagram at asele.tech. Until next time, I'll see you in the next episode. Take care and bye-bye.